If you're a break-even trader who's on the verge of quitting, but there's something in you telling you to just keep going, then this video is for you. It took me 4.5 years to make back all of my losses in a single day, and looking back, there were some clear signs that I was close. I'll be ranking those signs from the least to most impactful, with the last few determining whether you make it or not. The first sign that you'll inevitably be profitable is that you're always looking for ways that you can improve, not just in trading, but also life in general. In trading, it could mean something as simple as consuming podcasts on a regular basis. It could mean being willing to invest in mentorships. Like for example, even in business, you have people who are making millions who want to make billions. Those people are investing $100,000 just to have access to some of the brightest minds. But for most people, this will come in the form of looking up YouTube videos and finding out ways how they can improve certain aspects of their trading. Outside of the charts, something as simple as investing in your health, so going to the gym, looking up ways how you can eat healthier, because when you think clearer, you can trade better. Even 4 years into trading, right before I had my breakthrough, I was still investing a lot of my time in consuming podcasts such as Titans of Tomorrow, or TOT. It's on YouTube, it's hosted by Waqar Asim, and he goes through and interviews multiple traders, verified traders, who have had their skin in the game and provide really meaningful insights. And with those insights, I think to myself, how can I apply what they said into my system so that I can continue improving? And don't get me wrong, you don't want to just blindly implement everything that you see on the internet. What you want to do is you want to keep track of what you're doing, you want to keep track of when you're doing it and when you started, and then finally you want to set a date in the future and analyze whether or not it allowed you to move in the direction of consistency and profitability. So if it's a strategy related refinement, you don't want to just pick something random on the internet and risk money on it. Instead, what you want to do is backtest it and make sure that you have a degree of long-term conviction and understanding of why it actually works in the first place. Otherwise, you just waste time and money switching between different strategies when one appears to stop working. Likely, if you're the type of person who's watching this video, you already are learning for ways how you can improve yourself. So because it's fairly common, I'm going to put it in D tier. The second sign is that you're self-motivated. In trading, there's literally no one forcing you to show up. People were likely attracted into this profession because 1, they don't have to request for PTO when they decide to go on a vacation. 2, they don't have to ask for any sick days from their employer. And another reason is that they have the flexibility to actually travel when they want and also work where they want. However, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This doesn't work for most people. Trading is a performance-based job, meaning that you get paid based on how well you perform. And because you don't have a boss who's on your ass telling you what you should do, most people fail to make deadlines for themselves, and instead of working on tasks that would actually progress them in their desired direction, they just end up doing nothing, and therefore they end up stuck in this cycle of repeating the same exact habits for months, if not years on end. Therefore, for most people, it's actually better that you instead are working with a boss who does keep you accountable. Because of this, you should know how to apply urgency to yourself to get done with what you need to do. It could either come from that internal drive to just make something for yourself, or it can also come in the form of external accountability through something like a coach, just to keep you on track and make sure that you're doing what you need to be doing. Remaining self-motivated is a really important aspect, but it's fairly common, and I think in general it's still a little bit surface level. So therefore, we're going to put it in C tier. The third sign that you'll be profitable is that you seize the opportunities which are presented in front of you. And this does tie in with the previous point of being self-motivated. However, in this topic, it does expand a bit deeper, which is a common theme that you'll see in the future points. And I see this in 2 lights. We have 1, the macro-wise, and 2, the micro-wise. On a macro basis, it could be something as changing the way that you think. This oftentimes comes in the form of a mindset or perspective change, and those who are likely to become profitable do it right away. And I think this urgency comes from understanding that every day you don't progress towards your goal, you only slow down the compounding effect of growth. So for example, if you are getting 1% better every single day, then by the end of the compounding, your results are much greater than if you only improved 1% every few days. And now, on the micro basis, I realized that with most successful traders, they aren't hesitant on taking an opportunity which is in front of them. So for example, if there's a trade forming right in front of you and you already allocated how much risk you're willing to put aside for that trade, and you already assessed that that trade meets your criteria, then you have to be willing to put your money down. Every trade that you do take that's in accordance with your plan is an opportunity for you to be compounding your account. And even if you end up taking a loss, there's still something valuable to take away from that loss. For example, you can still assess whether the trade met your criteria and whether you executed your plan. And here's the thing. Many people say they want to improve, but not many people are willing to pounce on the opportunity when it's presented in front of them. In this case, I will be rating seizing opportunities in C tier still, similar for the same reasons as being motivated. Also, if you're feeling a bit lost with which prop firms you should trade with, along with what accounts you should buy, I made a free roadmap detailing the steps from which account you should choose, to passing your evaluation, to scaling your funding across multiple different other firms. You can have access to it right away. Just click on the link in the description and you don't even need your email. The next sign is that you're quick to reframe mistakes as opportunities to learn. So what happens when most people make a mistake is that they end up dwelling on it. So they think about all the money that they lost. They end up repeating in their minds the same moment exactly when they should have entered a position, when they should have gotten out, and they just end up in this cycle of repeating the same moments for why their account blew up. However, the honest truth is that we're human, we're not perfect, and the great thing is that you don't have to be perfect in order to trade profitably. There's this one trading YouTuber who I've looked up to for a while, and his name is Umar Ashraf. He's someone who has made multiple 7 figures a year just from trading itself. And you can see the journey on his YouTube where he literally makes, for example, $1 million in a single month. And the next month later, he has his biggest losing month. However, most traders take away the best lessons, not from how much they made, but rather the mistakes that they made that resulted in them losing money. So what do we want to do instead? We want to pick the meat, but leave the bones. Every time you make a mistake, it means that there's a learning lesson embedded in the experience. However, the only way that you can actually move on from anything is if you actively reframe in your thinking what just happened. If instead you're just dwelling on the past and you keep thinking how much money you lost, how many trades you lost in a row, then your mental is just so fixated on what happened in the past, and you become unable to actually focus on what you should be doing in the present moment. So therefore, by picking the meat, also known as the lessons, but leaving the bones, also known as leaving the traumatic experience in the past, or rather learning from the traumatic experience, then that's how you can actually focus on what you need to be doing in the present. And this ties back in with the point of not hesitating, not because you don't think that something can possibly go wrong in the short term, but rather it's because you understand that the lesson you receive is essential for your long-term growth as a trader. So I'll be ranking that in B tier. The next sign is that you have an extreme sense of accountability. When things aren't going our way, it's so easy to pinpoint the problems to other things. For example, even just recently, I think in around December to January, I went on a 14 trade losing streak. And mind you, my back-tested stats show that I have a 50% win rate. So when I was going through that losing streak, it just felt like the whole entire market was literally against me. However, when you don't take any accountability, then it means that there is no growth. You essentially are putting a cap on how much you can take away those learning experiences from what happened. So therefore, you end up putting a cap on how much you can actually grow as a trader. The easy thing to do is to deflect accountability to other things. So when you're on a losing streak, you could question, why is the hedge funds hate me? Why do the institutions want me to lose? All of these things are thoughts that naturally arise in your head. But the harder thing to do is to look at yourself and ask, what could I have done differently? For example, why didn't I risk less when I noticed that my execution was dropping? Why didn't I observe my thoughts outside of the charts and realize that I'm just risking too much that I can afford to at that moment in time? There's so many things in life that can happen to us, and there's so many things outside of our control. So therefore, it's never 100% of the time your fault. However, it is 100% of the time your responsibility to not only get out of the situation, but to also figure out what you can do next time. And with these mistakes, you can either drop the frequency, or you can also drop the financial consequences. So this means that you lose less money every time you make that mistake, and you make that mistake less. Again, this is to be expected with any profitable trader, and I do believe that the points further on will continue expanding, so therefore B tier. The next sign is that you have this undescribable but unwavering feeling as though everything is just going to work out. And I think this comes from an evidence of meeting past goals and breaking down big goals into small actionable goals that you can achieve right now. And I don't really want to dive much into the spiritual side of things. I'm going to keep it very logic and reasoning based for why this works. But essentially, you want to look at everything that is happening to you from a hindsight basis. And for example, with any superhero movie, most of the time we know the outcome. We know that in the end, the superhero ends up defeating the bad guy. But at the very beginning, we get to see the actual journey of how he arrived to that conclusion. So from the start, we might see that he's a normal guy and he was tasked with a huge responsibility to save the world. And in the events of trying to save the world, what ends up happening is he ends up getting beat down. There's a villain that ends up kicking his ass, and more often than not, he doesn't succeed right away. He ends up getting kicked down again, until finally there is a moment where he's able to look at what happened and channel into his own inner desires and find a way to come out on top. And what he doesn't realize is that those experiences of the hardships are what built him into the person who's finally able to take down the villain. What you essentially want to do when you're going through the hard times is to put yourself in the perspective of watching your own journey, where you kind of already know the outcome. So in this case, it could be trading profitably consistently, maybe being able to trade in a different country, whatever lifestyle you want, that is what you basically already see yourself living. And once life presents us the challenges that we inevitably have to go through, rather than identifying with what's happening, so for example, rather than me saying, man, I'm such a bad trader for losing 14 times in a row, what I can instead do is reframe everything that's happening to me as just the learning lessons that I needed to go through. And once I've built myself into the person who is capable of achieving that success, then I will naturally just achieve it. Again, when you feel as though everything is going to work out, you put yourself in the best position to actually make it become a reality. Simply put, it gives you the mental fortitude to actually continue persevering when most other people would have already quit. I believe this is so important, and it's honestly a bit deeper, so therefore I'm rating it in A tier. The second to last habit is that you understand that you're a human and you understand that you have vices, and therefore you put in place the right systems to make sure that those vices do not creep in to your everyday execution. And what I mean by systems is that you have in place the rules and criteria that have to be met and the processes for how you can actually trade more profitably over the long term. If you're a break-even trader, you most likely already have strategy. You already know how much you're supposed to risk, but you don't have a good process for how you can actually follow those plans. One thing I noticed, at least for myself, is that when I don't have a plan in mind, I'm a lot more likely to end up making decisions based on my emotions. So rather than doing the thing that allows me to progress over the long term, I just do the thing that settles my short-term discomfort. So for example, even just recently, I had 2 accounts that were pretty much halfway through my goal to the profit target. This is in the evaluation stage. And I have another 3 accounts that had 1 win, and so it's above 0. And what I did was I had a winning trade that I took across all accounts because I copy trade them. And with that winning trade, these 2 accounts would have ended up just shy of the profit goal. So what I did was I pushed back my actual profit target by an extra few points just so that I could pass the evaluations on the 2 accounts. However, what I didn't do was I didn't have a plan for what I would do with these other 3 accounts. What these other 3 accounts should have done was basically be executed under the same system that I already had. And the plan for the 2 accounts and how I was going to manage them should have been separated. But instead, I didn't have a set plan for all of them. So I treated them all the same. And what essentially happened that day was price hit my profit target, and then it completely reversed, and I had to end up getting out at break even. So instead of those 3 accounts actually having another winner, those 3 accounts just were break even for the day. And I essentially missed out on an opportunity simply because I didn't have a plan in mind. So therefore, what I did was I went back to the process. I realized that, hey, one of my vices is when I don't have a plan, I tend to act emotionally. So I immediately implemented a plan for how I can manage these accounts so that in the future, with a similar situation, I at least will have a plan, and therefore I won't experience that feeling of guilt not doing the right things. And because we're humans, and because whenever you're scaling, you're always going to be experiencing that sense of emotional discomfort, it's so important, and I feel as though it's such a key indication that you actually will eventually become profitable if you are implementing the right systems and the right rules to make sure that as long as you're getting 1% better, then that is your goal for the day, A tier. And as for the final sign, this is the one which separates traders who make it and those who end up stuck in a cycle and eventually quit. And that is an awareness of your number one desire and your number one priority, paired with evidence that your actions are in alignment with that priority. So essentially, number one, you know what you want. And number two, you're actually doing the things which allow you to get what you want. If you listen to a lot of your friends and family who work full-time jobs, they very likely express the desire to get out of the rat race, retire early, and live the life that they wanted. Or if anything, at least just have the opportunity to actually retire when they want. However, very few of them actually go out of their way to, one, not only seek the advice, but two, actually implement the advice when they come across that advice on, for example, social media. So instead of setting aside money to invest, what they do is they end up getting caught up in the next concert release, they end up getting caught up in the next vacation that they can take, and they essentially are spending first and investing last. And this is an example of how people's actions do not always align with what they say they want. They say they want something, yet they continue repeating the same actions, which keep them in the very position that they feel stuck in. It basically looks like this. They do X action, it gets them Y result. Y result is good enough for now. Good enough. And what they do is, instead of changing, they end up doing the same action, thus repeating the same cycle over and over again. And that's how break-even traders end up staying in the same cycle of doing the same action, which gets them Y result. And Y result is good enough because it makes you money in the short term, but then they don't change the system. So they end up repeating the same mistakes and repeating the same results. If you say you want one thing, but your actions are proving otherwise, then it's best to just pause and reassess, what is it that you truly want? And if you don't know where to start, then I suggest that you observe your own individual actions and play out the long-term effects over a 5 to 10 year time horizon. And if you don't like what you see, then you have to change the direction in which you are sailing. So if you're the type of person who continuously keeps breaking their rules and overtrading, and you say you don't want to overtrade, but all of your actions are quite literally evident that you do whatever it takes to get out of that emotional discomfort, then that's how you're just going to end up repeating the same cycle. Instead, what you want to do is you want to be the type of person who can isolate the number one priority that he wants to achieve. And from there, you want to pinpoint the one single action that you can be doing in the present moment that will help you get to that said outcome. So to all the break-even traders out there, or just those who struggle to scale, ask yourself why. Is it because you struggle to keep the money that you made? Do you have a long-term conviction in a strategy? Like, did you backtest it? Or are you just rotating between different strategies trying to find the one which allows you to have the best returns for the least amount of discomfort possible? From there, after you've dissected what it is which is holding you back, then make a plan for how you can implement that one habit or rule which will allow you to become a more profitable trader. And mind you, there are hundreds of activities that you can do which can get you to become more profitable. But what you want to do instead is focus on the one single action which will give you the highest ROI for the effort that you're putting in. And you want to be intentional with your resources, more specifically your time. Progress is most efficient when you treat your attention like a beam of light. You want to be focused on one thing at a time, yet you also want to be adaptable and able to shine on different objects when the priority changes, instead of having a wide focus on everything at once. So for visual purposes, you want to have a straight line of attention on what you want, rather than a beam which is just focused on many things at once. And this is the most important sign that you will actually get what you want, because so long as you have a clear focus in mind and you're making steps in the direction of that focus, then everything else will quite literally just be learning lessons. And there really isn't going to be anything in your way to stop you, because if there is, in your head, it's just immediately like, oh, okay, that's fine. This is just what I need to go through in order to become a more profitable trader. When I was stuck in that break-even cycle, the one thing which kept me going was just knowing I have a vision in sight and that I will do whatever it takes to get there. And if you resonate with these signs, but you're still not sure why, you're not consistent yet, that's where it can be beneficial to get a second pair of eyes. Most people, they try to figure this out alone, and that's what keeps them stuck for so long. That's why I am offering a one-on-one trading breakdown where I'll help diagnose what those problems actually are and offer a solution for what you should be doing instead. This is not for someone who wants one simple quick fix, who wants to get rich quick, but rather if you're someone who's just obsessed on growth and they just want to improve their skill set as a trader, then this is for you. Book a call by clicking the link in the description below. And I also only have a limited number of slots per week because it's me who you'll be talking to one-on-one. So book now while the slots are limited.